This is not the kind of video that I normally make. My name is Jeff. I worked for years as a stand-up comic, as a comedy club manager, and now I work for an agency helping comedians find work on cruise ships. I use this little YouTube channel to promote my creative projects and talk about games like Dungeons and Dragons. I don't talk about serious subjects. But what are you supposed to do when a serious subject is all you can think about? Like, why would I ever talk about Russia? The music you can hear in the background, that's Anya. That's not her real name, and I'm not going to be showing her face to protect her identity because she's so young. Anya came here with her mother last year, two people among hundreds of thousands of refugees who came to Canada after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Our two families became friends, and we've gotten close. Anya is super talented. She's a musician. She plays piano, and she composes her own music at just 12 years old. This song that's playing right now, she wrote that. That's her song. She's a great kid. She loves cats. She wants to go on bike rides every day. She draws. She writes stories about magic and time travel. And she's doing all of it 8,000 kilometers away from home, all with full knowledge of what's going on there. She sees the news. She knows what's changing in the war that's ravaging her homeland day by day. Her father is still over there. They communicate via video calls when they can, but just thinking about it makes her sad. She's a 12-year-old kid. When I was 12, my biggest concerns were whether my computer could run the original Fallout game, or if I'd be able to find the next Dragonlance book in the series I was reading. Anya is incredible, and she has so much stress to bear on those little shoulders that it crushes me to know that I can only do so much to help her. And no matter what her parents do, no matter what I do, there are so many forces outside of our control affecting her in ways that no kid should ever be affected. And the really horrifying truth in all of that is that even in her incredibly dark situation, Anya is one of the fortunate ones. In 2023, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Vladimir Putin and Maria Lvova-Belova. These were for their involvement in the abduction and illegal forced migration of children. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, an unknown number of children have been abducted from their homes by the Russian military and moved across the border into Russia. I say an unknown number because the Ukrainian government has been able to confirm over 20,000 children, but the Russian government proudly boasts about having liberated over 700,000. I reached out to Ukrainian independent journalist and YouTuber Anna from Ukraine to see what she thought about this disparity in her opinion.
There is one thing that you have to understand. Ukraine reports the children that went missing after the start of invasion, that were either taken away from the orphanages or were separated from their families. When Russia says that it has liberated 700,000 children, it means all children on the territories that it occupied, because by its occupation, Russia treats it as liberation. We all see what their liberation looks like. In Mariupol, for example, but this is what they claim. So they say this number because they believe that everyone who is on the annexed territory is saved from this rotten West that we represent together with you.
So the number is somewhere between 20,000 and 700,000, and she's right, they have to be lying. However, the Russian government currently operates an estimated 43 re-education facilities where children from these occupied regions are taken. Of those countless thousands, only about 400 have been returned to their families. The rest of them are forcibly and often anonymously adopted into Russian families, sometimes thousands of kilometers away. In addition to that, people living in the occupied regions of Ukraine are punished, beaten, or even shot for any form of resistance, even cultural. Displaying the Ukrainian flag, speaking the Ukrainian language, or criticism of their invaders or the Russian government all have the potential to be lethal. This is a cultural genocide. A lot of reporting has been done about this, but I hadn't heard about it. And talking to my friends around Canada and the United States, most people I talked to hadn't heard of it either. So why don't we know about it? First, these arrest warrants were issued in March of 2023. The stories surrounding the Russian abduction and re-education of Ukrainian children started to pick up, but after the horrific events of October 7th and the Israeli invasion of Gaza, the world's attention shifted to the Middle East and the ongoing tragedies and genocide taking place against the Palestinian people. This is understandable. There's a lot going on right now. At this very moment, there are literally dozens of wars and armed conflicts going on around the world, and attention just bounces back and forth. It's overwhelming. It is exhausting, but to the people stuck in the middle of these conflicts, it is everything. For Anya and her mom, it's every day, every hour, every thought punctuated, bookended by thoughts of home. Every moment of joy here in Canada soured by a combination of survivor's guilt and doubt. Every call home peppered with worse and worse news. The abduction of thousands or hundreds of thousands of children and moving them to places literally and unironically being called re-education camps is one of those ongoing, worsening bits of news. I would wager most people in the Western world know who this man is. He's the president of the Russian Federation. We know his name, we know his face, we know what kind of animal he is. As the president and the person who's overseen everything I'm talking about today, he bears a lot of responsibility for the crimes against humanity being carried out against the Ukrainian people. However, this whole situation is not entirely his doing. Which brings us to the subject of this video, Maria Lvova-Belova. Now, her name may sound like a Bond villain or a cartoon bad guy from Rocky and Bullwinkle,
Boris and Natasha.
Ta-da!
but make no mistake, she's one of the worst war criminals of our generation. She is the person I want to talk about today, and the true monster behind all of this. Like I said, there are a lot of wars and armed conflicts going on right now, and they all have their monsters. And in my honest opinion, I don't think any of them hold a candle to Belova. I don't think any of them match the level of self-serving, uncompromising evil. Evil in its truest form that is packaged into this short blonde in flowy dresses that you see here. She puts on a show, and she embodies the new ultra-conservative traditional lifestyle that's popular in the upper echelon of the Russian body politic. In 2023, the International Criminal Court put out the warrant for her arrest, but that hasn't stopped her or her husband from posting posed, light-hearted photos on their basically public Facebook accounts. Since the invasion, she has been the enthusiastic face of this issue. When I first heard about this, I thought, no, that's not a real thing. Like, there's no way that there's that many kids being abducted. But this isn't a secret. This isn't something that they're hiding. In fact, they're pretty proud of it. Again, the Russian government claims to have liberated over 700,000 kids, and that number is already old. That's close to 1 million kids taken by now. Their families left in Ukraine. Their cultural identity is being carved out of them, and they are being moved into Russian homes. The Russian story is that all of these kids are left abandoned on the front lines. Hundreds of thousands of them orphaned by the war, and that liberating them into Russian re-education camps is the best thing for them. Now, this obviously isn't true, as there are many parents, still living, whose kids have been taken from them. Communication with the Russian-occupied areas of Ukraine is difficult to impossible, as is verifying any of this monster or the Russian government's claims. But most importantly, the math doesn't make sense here. Basically, the Russians claim that they've not only liberated 700,000 kids, but that all of these kids are orphaned or abandoned. At the same time, the Russian government is also downplaying the count of Ukrainian civilian deaths. Now, this number has estimates ranging from 10,000 on the low end to nearly 50,000 at the high end, with Ukrainian Chief Prosecutor for War Crimes Yuri Belousov claiming that the number could be over 100,000, but that they would need to be found and identified after the occupied territories are liberated. Now, if we take the lowest estimate from the United Nations, that's 11,500 civilian deaths. Russia's claim is that all 700,000 children are orphans is impossible. Even if we take the ridiculous leap to assume that all 11,500 were women with children, that's 60 kids each. So the claim that they are all orphaned or abandoned kids on the front line is completely and obviously ludicrous. Belova has made several public appearances trying to build Russian support for the program. She's told the story that in September of 2022, there was a group of children that had been taken from Mariupol who showed their resistance by singing the Ukrainian national anthem. But that since then, They had learned to love Russia and were happy in their new homes. Give me a fucking break. On the 17th of November 2023, the Moscow Times reported that Lvova-Belova had adopted a Ukrainian child of her own, a 15-year-old from Russian-occupied Mariupol. The kidnapped child, who's over 18 now, is named Philip Golovnia. He was made the poster child for the re-education program, and he stands next to his pretty adoptive mother and tells the story of how he was actually kicked out of his home in the middle of the war zone. It's a story that literally everybody in Ukraine says is definitely not true. I'm not a psychologist or a doctor, so I won't pretend to understand his own motivations, nor how to identify when someone is speaking under duress, but this kid has been used in propaganda piece after propaganda piece in Russia since he was taken from Mariupol. I'm also not here to litigate his claims. I think he is best left alone. The details of his story are impossible to verify for obvious reasons. What can be seen, however, is that Belova absolutely knows what she's doing. The veil wears thin when she is confronted about these issues. Belova did an interview with Vice News in Moscow last year, and personally, watching this video is where my opinion on this woman was solidified. When you read about people in history or now, people who you may disagree with or people who history has shown to be monsters, a lot of them genuinely believe that they are doing good in the world somehow. We're all the heroes of our own stories, and for a lot of complicated and shitty reasons, good intentions sometimes have horrible and lasting consequences. There are, however, another kind of monster, the cynics, who know exactly what they're doing. They know that they're causing harm. They know that they're lying, and they just don't care. It benefits them to lie. It benefits them to cause harm, and it's almost impossible to tell where the proverbial line is for these people. I feel like these monsters have the capacity to cause the most damage in the world, more than the believers, because it takes somebody truly corrupted and evil inside to look at the large-scale damage regarding children like this and not even bat an eye. So, the Vice interview. Isabel Young does a great job here at attempting to hold Belova accountable as sternly as possible without being directly confrontational, and you can see the balance of power in the room switch heavily to Young's side as she confronts this monster for 13 grueling minutes. Over the course of just 13 minutes, every single answer Belova gives to Isabel Young is a provable, open, and blatant lie. She does this consciously, the most egregious of which is the claim that Ukraine did nothing to evacuate the children of Mariupol, when the Ukrainian government attempted to do just that. On March 5th, a temporary ceasefire was granted and the evacuation efforts began. As soon as they did, the Russians violated the ceasefire and shelled the agreed-upon humanitarian corridor, stopping the evacuation and forcing the civilians back into the city. The United Nations, the United Kingdom, and the European Union have all placed sanctions on this woman. There's an ICC warrant for her arrest for war crimes, and she talks openly about doing these things that are war crimes, and throughout this interview, you can see that she doesn't even really believe the lies that she's telling. Hundreds of thousands of children, by Russia's own count, have been moved from Ukraine to Russia, claiming that they're all orphans while simultaneously downplaying the count of civilian casualties. Both of these things cannot be true, but when you are an evil, manipulative liar, that doesn't really matter. This dystopian reality the Ukrainian people are being forced to live through is a cultural genocide. It is an erasure of their culture and their way of life. And at the center of it, this Dolores Umbridge-ass evil woman is packing their kids off to re-education camps while lying to our faces about it. So what can we do to help? First of all, while there are a lot of charities helping the Ukrainian people, there is one that is specifically doing the work to fight for these kids. My channel is very small, but assuming that this video doesn't get demonetized, any revenue that I make from it is going to be donated to the Save Ukraine charity. At the beginning of this video, I said about 400 of those kids had been returned. On April 24th, 2024, Belova held the first talks with the Ukrainian government to return some of the kids. These first talks were for the safe return of only 48 children, and of those 48, the Russian government only agreed to return 29. 29 out of 20,000. But it was a start. It's been a few months since then, and in that time, only about 400 kids have been returned to their families. There are additional difficulties involved in the process. While many of them have families in Ukraine waiting for them, the reality is that a lot of these children are orphans. With their parents murdered by the Russian military, they don't have families to return to. But bearing that in mind, how healthy could it possibly be for a child to have their parents murdered by the military of a nation, only to then be moved into that nation and taught that their parents, in fact, were the enemy? So, about 400 out of an unknown number between 20 and 700,000, but with more support, more can be done. This wouldn't have been possible without the help of Save Ukraine, which I will be linking below. I haven't been able to get this story out of my head since I heard about it, and all I care about is just getting the word out there, telling people, making sure that people know about it. So please share this video. Send it around, copy it, steal it, download it, and re-upload it. I don't care. I just want people to know about it. Thank you if you made it this far. I love you. Goodbye.